Okay, so when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, um, we tend to picture this big wave of purely British genius,
The
right?
standard narrative, yeah.
But if you really drill down, what was the material that made it all possible? The railways, those huge bridges, iron ships, the actual arteries of the British Empire.
It boils down to wrought iron. That was the stuff, the essential backbone for, well, pretty much all the major infrastructure in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Exactly. And for, gosh, centuries now, the story's been that the tech breakthrough for mass producing it came from one person.
Henry Cort, an Englishman, he got the patents for this thing called the puddling and rolling process. That was 1783, 1784.
And that process was key, wasn't it? For taking brittle pig iron and making it into useful, strong, malleable wrought iron.
Absolutely crucial. And yeah, that story's been like the accepted version for over 200 years, set in stone almost.
Right. So our mission today in this deep dive is to look at some really groundbreaking new research that pretty much turns that whole origin story on its head.
It really does.
We're going to explore why this, foundational technology of Britain's industrial power is being seriously reevaluated.
And why the actual birthplace of that innovation might not be some tidy English workshop after all.
But instead, maybe, somewhere completely different, like a complex, contested site in the colonial Caribbean.
And the really compelling part here, what makes this worth digging into, is that it's not just, guesswork.
No.
It's based on solid archival evidence, stuff that Dr. Jenny Bulstrode at University College London pulled together.
And it's been peer-reviewed, published in a serious academic journal, History and Technology, just 2023.
Exactly. So this research is forcing us to ask some pretty tough questions,
Yeah.
not just about who invented the tech that fueled the empire.
But also how that knowledge might have been, well, taken
Yeah,
and then maybe deliberately erased.
right. Before we jump into the new stuff, let's just quickly sketch out that traditional picture again. Henry Cort.
Yeah, Henry Cort. He was formerly in naval administration, then became an ironmaster. And the history books credit him with inventing this vital method for making lots of high-quality wrought iron.
And his big breakthrough, supposedly, was figuring out how to use Britain's coal instead of charcoal, which was getting scarce and expensive.
Makes sense. Coal was abundant.
And tying the success to Cort personally, well, it fit perfectly into that narrative of, British industrial genius driving everything. So the challenge from Bulstrode's research is it's pretty fundamental. It suggests maybe the Industrial Revolution wasn't just this purely British internal light bulb moment.
But maybe you relied on something else.
Yeah, maybe relied on taking innovations developed by highly skilled people, often enslaved people out in the colonies, appropriating them.
Okay, before we go further, let's just quickly touch on the tech itself. What was this puddling process that Cort patented? Why was it such a big deal?
Okay, so the basic problem is cleaning up the iron. You smelt iron ore, you get pig iron. Cheap to make with coal, yes, but it's full of carbon, makes it brittle, useless for building stuff that needs to flex or bear weight.
Right, you need wrought iron for that railways, bridges, all that stuff. Strong but malleable.
Exactly. And to get that, you have to remove most of that carbon and other junk.
Which traditionally meant using charcoal fires, right? Slow, expensive.
Very. And the Brits needed a way to do it fast, cheap, high volume using their coal. But coal itself adds impurities like sulfur. Makes it even trickier.
So Cort's patented process.
The puddling process, it involved heating the pig iron in a special furnace, a reverberatory one where the flames don't directly touch the metal. And you puddle it with these long iron bars.
Stirring the molten metal.
Yeah, it exposes the carbon to oxygen from the air, so it burns off. You get these clumps of purified iron forming.
And then those clumps were rolled.
Right, rolled into bars, hence puddling and rolling. It needed really precise temperature control and, honestly, a huge amount of physical skill from the workers.
Okay, so that's the established European problem and the patented solution now.
Yeah.
Let's cross the Atlantic, because the sources Dr. Bulstrode found point somewhere else entirely.
Yes. Years before Cort filed his patents, there seems to have been a highly efficient ironworks already running, using a sophisticated process.
And this was where?
Near Morant Bay. That's in eastern Jamaica.
Jamaica.
And the record suggests they were already converting scrap iron, pig iron, into high-quality wrought iron, the good stuff, on a productive scale.
And critically, who was actually doing the work? Not Europeans trying to figure it out.
No. That's the core finding. The sources identify the innovators as a group of 76 black metallurgists, highly skilled individuals.
Skilled metallurgists, not just laborers.
Definitely not. Many were of West African origin. Some were enslaved, yes, but the records describe them as experts. They developed a method to get the purity and quality needed for, essentially, mass production.
And they weren't just inventing this in a vacuum, presumably?
No, not at all. The research argues that they were drawing on deep, sophisticated metallurgical traditions from West and Central Africa. Think areas like the Bight of Benin, the Gold Coast, Bight of Biafra, places with long histories of advanced ironworking.
So they brought that knowledge with them and adapted it.
Precisely. Adapted it to the specific conditions, the materials available in Jamaica, the demands of that colonial economy.
Is there direct proof of their skill level? Or is that an inference?
Oh, there's pretty compelling direct evidence. The white overseer at the foundry, a guy called John Reeder, he actually wrote in his reports that he himself was, and this is a direct quote, quite ignorant of such a business.
He admitted he didn't know how it worked.
Yes. And he then described the Jamaican metallurgists explicitly as being, quote, perfect in every branch of the iron manufactory.
Wow. Perfect in every branch. That's an incredible admission from a colonial official. It basically says the technical expertise was entirely with them.
It's powerful testimony, isn't it? It shows the knowledge gap wasn't in Jamaica. It was in the administration supposedly overseeing it.
And do we know any of their names? You mentioned 76.
We do, thanks to those colonial records, though they're often anglicized or brief. Names like Devonshire, Mingo, Friday, Captain Jack. Also Kofi, sometimes written as Cuffy, and Kwasi or Kwashi.
Devonshire, Mingo, Friday, Captain Jack, Kofi, Kwasi. These are the people who, according to this research, may have actually unlocked a key part of the industrial age.
That's the argument, yes.
And you mentioned this links to a deeper history of African metallurgy.
Absolutely. The research connects this to a much longer legacy. For instance, it points to a German traveler, Hieronymus Münzer, back in 1494.
1494. Way back?
Yeah. He visited the Royal Ironworks in Lisbon, Portugal, and saw black artisans forging massive naval gear anchors, cannons, ship fittings, huge scale.
What did he say about them?
He was apparently stunned by their skill and their output, likened them to cyclopses in Vulcan's cave, mythological figures known for metalworking.
Cyclopses.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, the skills needed weren't trivial, and there's historical precedent for Africans possessing high-level metallurgical knowledge recognized even then by Europeans.
Exactly. So when people were forcibly taken from these specific regions of Africa to places like Jamaica, they weren't just bringing muscle, they were carrying sophisticated technical knowledge.
Knowledge they then applied and adapted.
Immediately, to meet the needs of the Caribbean colonies, processing available materials.
Right. So if this Jamaican operation, run by these skilled black metallurgists, was so advanced and, you said, profitable, why didn't it just continue? Why didn't the British authorities say, try to take it over directly or celebrate it?
Well, because its very success in that specific colonial context became a major problem, a threat, really.
How so? You mentioned profit. Bulstrode estimated the output was huge, like over 7 million pounds a year in today's money. Surely they wanted that.
They wanted the profit, yes, but they didn't want the autonomy that came with it. That was the sticking point.
Autonomy. Okay, let's unpack that. What was the threat?
Two things, really. First, this foundry was making vital stuff, naval supplies, maybe even cannons, anchors, tools. If black workers controlled that production locally.
It bypassed the official system, where colonies had to buy expensive manufactured goods from Britain.
Exactly. It undercut the whole mercantilist setup. That was bad enough for the economic planners in London. But the second threat was much bigger, much more immediate, especially in a place like Jamaica with its history of resistance and slave rebellions.
You mean military potential?
Precisely. Local control over the means of production, especially weapons-grade materials and the tools to make them, that represented potential political power, military self-sufficiency for the enslaved and free black population.
And in a slave society, that kind of power in black hands would be terrifying to the colonial authority.
Utterly intolerable. Economic competition they could maybe manage, but the idea of an independent, black-led industrial base potentially arming itself, that was an existential threat to the entire colonial project in Jamaica.
So it had to be shut down.
Yeah.
The success was its own undoing.
It seems so. Ideologically, it just couldn't be allowed to exist. And critically, the knowledge it represented couldn't be allowed to remain uncontrolled there. It had to be captured.
Which brings us to the really crucial question. How did this specific advanced Jamaican process apparently get from Morant Bay to Henry Cort in England.
This is where the research points towards, well, basically industrial espionage, knowledge transfer through those overlapping naval and colonial trading networks.
How does Cort fit in? You said he was in debt?
Deeply in debt,
Mm-hmm.
desperately looking for a cheaper, better way to make wrought iron in England to save his business. And Bulstrode's archival work uncovered a key link.
Which was?
Cort had a cousin who was heavily involved in the colonial trade network, specifically the iron trade connecting Britain and the West Indies.
A family connection right in the middle of that transatlantic flow of goods and information.
Exactly. It provides a very plausible channel. This cousin, potentially others in that network, could have learned about the highly effective Jamaican process, maybe seen it, gotten reports about it.
And passed that detailed, practical knowledge back to Cort.
That's the strong suggestion. Given Cort's financial desperation and this direct family link to the relevant trade route, it looks less like Cort independently invented the same complex process just a few years later.
And more like he acquired the critical intelligence about a process already working successfully elsewhere.
Yes, a sudden transfer of know-how rather than slow independent discovery. He could then take that adapted Jamaican method, implement it in his own English works, and crucially patent it under his own name, claim ownership legally.
And once the knowledge was secured in England, patented by Cort, what happened back in Jamaica? To the original foundry near Morant Bay.
The final act of erasure, it seems. The sources uncovered by Bulstrode indicate that Jamaican ironworks was shut down, officially, under martial law.
Martial law. That sounds serious.
It implies it was seen as a security issue, not just an economic one. And it wasn't just closed, it was physically dismantled.
Taken apart.
Yes. The specialized equipment, the furnaces, the rollers, whatever specific tools they were using it was stripped out. And apparently transferred. Shipped to England.
Shipped to England? Possibly to Cort's facilities or similar places.
That seems likely, or at least to operations connected to the Navy or those same colonial trade networks. It fits the pattern.
And the men. The 76 metallurgists, Devonshire, Mingo, Kofi, the others. What happened to them?
That part is harder to trace definitively in the records, as is sadly often the case for enslaved individuals. The paper trail tends to go cold.
Understandable.
But the act of taking the specialized equipment along with the knowledge strongly suggests a move to capture or at least neutralize the human expertise, too.
So whether they were killed or maybe sold off and dispersed to prevent them restarting elsewhere, or even potentially forcibly moved with the machinery.
We don't know for sure their individual fates. But the collective result was the same. The unique concentration of skill and knowledge in Morant Bay was broken up, scattered, and the physical site of their innovation was effectively erased from Jamaica.
It fits that wider pattern you mentioned, doesn't it? Imperial powers appropriating not just resources, but also the intellectual and technological capital from the colonies.
It aligns perfectly, yes.
Okay, so summing this up, the picture emerging from this research is stark. A crucial innovation, maybe the key process enabling the mass production of wrought iron for the Industrial Revolution.
Appears to have been developed and perfected in Jamaica by skilled black metallurgists, adapting African techniques.
Developed under duress,
Yeah.
certainly, but technically successful and highly profitable.
Until it became strategically inconvenient, even dangerous to the colonial power structure.
At which point the knowledge was transferred, possibly via family and trade connections, to an indebted English ironmaster who patented it.
And the original source, the Jamaican foundry, and its expert workforce, was dismantled and effectively written out of history.
So the story we all learned, the Great British Invention by Henry Cort, might actually be, in large part, a cover for a pretty profound act of technological appropriation.
That's the core argument put forward by the research, yes. It forces a fundamental rethink about where the technologies that drove modern industry actually came from.
And it suggests that history, particularly technological history, often gets written by those who hold the power to patent, the power to publish, the power to erase.
Not necessarily by the people who actually did the innovating on the ground.
Now, a claim this big, shifting the credit for something so central to the Industrial Revolution, it must have faced some pushback, right?
Yeah.
How solid is this research academically?
That's a really crucial point. And yes, any major revision like this gets scrutinized intensely. But the research has held up under that academic scrutiny.
How so?
Well, as we mentioned, it was published in History and Technology, a respected peer-reviewed journal. And significantly, in November 2023, the journal's editors took the step of issuing a formal public statement.
What did they say?
They explicitly affirmed the study's scholarly rigor. They confirmed it went through the proper peer review process, met all the expected academic standards, and that the archival evidence presented was valid and accurately interpreted.
So the academic gatekeepers are standing by the work. This isn't some fringe theory being floated online.
No, it's validated historical research based on primary source documents, interpreted within the established methodologies of the field. It's a serious contribution to historical understanding.
Okay, so if we accept this evidence, if we try to look past the patents and the legal ownership claims that were, backed by imperial force, what's the takeaway?
I think the takeaway is about recognition. It's what Dr. Bulstrode argues for, shifting our focus. We need a way to recognize innovation based on use, on successful adaptation and practice, not just who managed to file the paperwork or claim ownership later.
Looking at who actually did it, not just who signed the patent.
Exactly. And when you apply that lens to the evidence from Morant Bay, well, the authorship for perfecting that crucial wrought iron process seems to land squarely with those 76 black metallurgists.
They become the architects of that specific vital breakthrough.
That's the powerful implication, yes.
Right. So let's just quickly recap this deep dive. We've explored research suggesting that the puddling and rolling process, absolutely fundamental for making the wrought iron that built the Industrial Revolution,
Wasn't solely invented in England by Henry Cort.
but was likely developed, perfected, and put into productive use years earlier in Jamaica.
By a group of highly skilled black metallurgists, drawing on African traditions whose names we are only now recovering, like Devonshire, Mingo, Friday, Captain Jack, Kofi, Kwasi.
And that their successful operation was seen as a threat, dismantled under martial law, its equipment shipped away, and the credit for the innovation transferred across the Atlantic.
Leaving us with a 200-year-old narrative that obscured this colonial appropriation. It's a really potent example of how empires function, extracting not just labor and materials,
But intellectual capital, too.
yeah,
And then controlling the story about where progress comes from.
precisely.
It leads to a pretty profound final thought, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If a technological breakthrough, this significant one that literally shaped the modern world and powered an empire, could be effectively hidden, misattributed, erased from the mainstream record for over 2 centuries,
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other crucial innovations, what other vital contributions to science, technology, medicine, maybe developed in colonial settings by people whose voices were suppressed?
What else is out there still waiting?
Exactly. What other parts of our history are still waiting for their proper recognition? That's definitely something for you to think about.